The aim of this video is to give you a presentation of the apple scab model in RIMpro. To start with, select a weather station on your map, or in the list of your weather stations, and open the apple scab model. The first thing that you need to know is that the apple scab model needs a biofix to start correctly. A biofix is the time when the first spores are ready to be discharged onto the trees. There are different ways to know your biofix. Either there is a spore trap next to you. Either you use the suggested date in the RIMpro bulletins that are sent weekly in spring. We advise different dates for different regions in the world. You can adapt this date to your location. You can also use the date of green tip of your apple trees. Indeed, scab spore maturity is often synchronous with tree bud break. Remember that you need to set both dates, the biofix and the date of green tip. To go to your local parameters, you can click on this clock icon next to the name of your weather station. Or you can directly go in Administration, Biological Parameters. In this table you can change here the date of green tip for your different locations. Just click directly in the table and change the date. And you can also change the biofix date for apple scab. Just change the date and quit. We can now open the apple scab model. You can see that you have different tabs. We'll go through each of them together. First of all, the primary season. There are different graphs in this primary season. The bar under the graphs is a summary of the rain periods, in dark blue, and the wetness period, in light blue, that have been registered by your weather station or sent by satellite data if you have a virtual weather station. The bottom graph is the evolution of the spore maturation on top of the soil. At the beginning of the season, the spores of the fungus are still closed in pseudothecias. In dark red you can see the spores that are immature, and in bright red are the spores that are mature. When a spore is mature, any rain event, provided humidity and temperatures are sufficient, can create a spore discharge. Spore maturation is automatically calculated by the model depending on wetness and temperature. Now if we zoom on an infection event, we can go through the different steps together. You can see that some spores are mature in the soil, bright red area. Then you have a rain event here in dark blue. This rain event is causing a discharge of spores onto the trees. This spore discharge is shown in the yellow histogram. Once the spores have landed on the tree, they can start germinating. In this example, you can see light blue equals wetness in the bar below the graph. Wetness is necessary for the spore germination. As a result, the top graph is showing some spore germination, white area. During this period in white, spores are on the leaf surface and this is the moment when they are the most susceptible. Once that the first spore has started to infect the plant, the red infection line starts. Then the rest of the population infects the leaf. And the top of the line is the last spore that infects the tree. Once the spores are inside the tree, they develop a mycelium that spreads through the leaf. It is shown in orange on the graph. This is what we call primary stroma. It means that the mycelium is already into the leaves. But it can still be reached by some fungicides that have a post-infection efficacy. If we zoom out a little bit, You can see that you have multiple infections along the season. And they have different intensities. The higher the infection curve, the more important the infection. An extreme infection such as this one has to be managed with a strong fungicide program. When all the spores have finished their maturation in the soil. This is the end of the scab primary season. If you have spots in your orchard at the end of the primary season, they could sporulate and create secondary infections. In this case, you can have a look at the Scab Secondaries tab. This is the graph for the secondary infections. Let's zoom in a little bit. New infections on young leaves are in green, and new infections on fruits are in red. The susceptibility of the fruits to scab infection declines when the fruit gets older. For this graph too, you have to pay attention to the intensities. For example, this is a severe infection. At the end of the primary season, the Spots tab can also help you. Let's zoom in a little bit. Horizontal line is a leaf level. The lines 1 to 5 are the rosette leaves. They tend to unfold and develop at once. The leaves number 6, 7, 8, etc. are the shoot leaves. Leaves are not always susceptible to apple scab. They are only susceptible until they reach on average 50% of their final size. The moment when the leaves are susceptible is in bright green. And when it turns dark green, it means that the leaf is not susceptible to scab anymore. Each time there is an infection, the red dots indicate the leaves that may have been affected by this infection, because they were susceptible at this moment. In this case, the first infection is hitting only the rosette leaves. The big infection here is hitting the last rosette leaf. And then the shoot leaves number 1 and 2. The model tells you when the symptom will become visible. In this case, for those 3 leaves, first symptoms of this infection will become visible around the 5th of May, as shown by this grey area. You can also use this tool backwards. For example, if you walk in your orchard and you see that you have scab lesions on leaves number 4 and 5, you look for the red dots hitting those shoot leaves. And you can guess that it was the infections of the 1st and the 4th of May that caused the symptom. The Weather Data tab is a summary of your weather data. In red is the temperature. In blue is the rain that has been recorded by your weather station. In grey is the relative humidity. The wetness periods are in light blue at the bottom of your graph. Sometimes during the primary season, you can have extreme infections that get out of the screen. Let's change location to show you an example. If we zoom on this specific infection, we can see that you have multiple rain events causing spore discharge. As a result, spores are constantly germinating and infecting. And this ends up as an extreme infection that gets out of the screen. In this case, there is an option called breakpoints. A breakpoint kills all the germinating spores in the model. So it can either simulate a contact fungicide that was 100% efficient, or it can be used to reset the start of the infection. In this case, if we want to see separately the infection that is related to this rain event and the infection that is related to the other small rain events, we can set a breakpoint in between the 2 rain events. In this case, we could set a breakpoint For example, on the 25th of April at 6 a.m. We now go to breakpoints. Set the date. And click on Save and Recalculate and Show. You can see that our breakpoint has correctly been taken into account by the DSS. We observe that the spores that were discharged during this rain event are causing an extreme infection. That stops just there. And the other 3 small rain events created this pool of germinating spores. And this ends up in a high infection. But not as much as the first one. Do not hesitate to use this tool when you want to see some events individually. RIMpro also offers you the possibility to assess your fungicide spraying program. It helps you to choose the most suitable fungicide based on the growth of the plant, the wash-off because of the rain, most of the infections are sprayed preventively. When you see that there is a risk coming, you can test the effectiveness of different fungicides. Click on Spray Plan and select the date and time. The list of fungicides is adapting to the country you belong to. In our case, we can choose a fungicide called Sigma, Captan. The legal rate for your country is registered here. Next step is to tick the orchards that you want to spray. You can manage these orchards in the tab fields. In our example, we will spray the Gala plot. Click on Save and Next. You can find the complete list of your treatments in the List Treatments tab. Now go to Show Orchard. Select the Gala plot. And click on Recalculate and Show. Now, on the primary infections graph, we can see that the fungicide spray has been correctly registered. Fungicide coverage appears as a grey layer on top of the graph of the primary infections. It means that you have a coverage of 100% at the time of application. Then the coverage goes down because of rain and leaf growth. This rain event leads to an important wash-off, which causes a rapid decrease of the coverage. Then the fungicide coverage decreases slowly, mostly due to leaf growth. What is advised is that you have at least 30% of fungicide coverage at the moment of the infection. In our example, the fungicide, Captan, mostly acts during germination of the spores. So you should have at least 30% of fungicide left at the moment of the spore germination. Now let's pretend that you've also sprayed curatively with a fungicide that has a post-infection efficacy. We can select a treatment on the 25th of May in the afternoon. Then we choose a fungicide that has a post-infection efficacy. Score, for instance, difenocarnazole. And then we spray again the Gala plot. Click on Show Orchard and select the Gala orchard. You can see that the score fungicide has been correctly registered. The grey layer that goes backwards in time indicates the curative efficacy of the fungicide in degree hours. The model will indicate the moment until which the fungicide keeps 100% curative efficacy. and after that the efficacy decreases. Some fungicides have both preventive and curative efficacy. This is the case in this example because both fungicides show a gray layer on either side of the treatment date. Our database contains the efficiencies of the vast majority of fungicides used worldwide. This infection is correctly sprayed because the preventive fungicide covers the germination window, and the curative fungicide layer goes back in time before the start of the infection. The models are updated every 30 minutes. During the season, it is very important to look regularly at the forecast and the models, because the forecast will also be updated every 30 minutes. In the last tab called Weather Forecast, you can choose the forecasting service that you want to use for your predictions. Or you could also enter your personal forecast if you click on Edit my 48 hours forecast. In this section, you can change the time of the rain amount, and duration of wetness. Do not hesitate to send us your questions or remarks at support@rimpro.eu.